In the early hours of June 9th, 2024, around midnight, something happened that the town of Reddick, Florida will never forget. During these quiet hours, while everyone was asleep inside their homes, a 14-year-old boy walked toward his elderly neighbor's house with steady, unsettling steps. His name was Jesse Stone. Jesse entered the house silently without making a single sound. Inside, the 90-year-old woman was asleep in her bedroom, unaware that terrifying moments were about to unfold. Minutes later, a faint, helpless cry echoed through the darkness. The cry of a woman who could not fight back. A brutal assault began, a violent physical on the vulnerable woman. When law enforcement arrived after the emergency call, they found signs of violence throughout the house and evidence pointing to a horrific attack. As the Marion County Sheriff's Office began its investigation, nearby surveillance footage, combined with DNA analysis, led them to a single suspect, Jesse Stone. Within hours of collecting the evidence, Jesse Stone was arrested and taken to the sheriff's office, where the first official interrogation session began.
So, we sent your DNA and the sex kit up to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who does the testing and stuff for stuff like that. Okay, is there any reason at all that your DNA would be on her clothes?
Yeah, when I said goodbye to her, we hugged, like a slight hug.
Okay.
That's...
Let me be a little bit more specific. Your DNA was on her underwear.
What?
The investigator immediately moves to the core of the interrogation, confronting the child with the scientific evidence in a decisive manner. The child's initial reaction reflects a mixture of partial denial and surprise, which becomes evident when he attempts to explain the presence of DNA on the victim's clothing in a way that appears natural, citing a simple farewell hug. This explanation represents a dual psychological defense mechanism. On one hand, he tries to minimize the significance of the evidence, and on the other, he seeks to reframe the event as ordinary and harmless in an attempt to reduce the legal and psychological threat posed by the scientific findings. However, when the investigator informs him that the DNA was found on the victim's underwear, the child exhibits intense shock and clear internal confusion, a natural response when confronted with evidence that cannot be refuted. This moment represents a critical point of psychological pressure, where the child's attempts to evade responsibility through justification collide with the unequivocal reality of the evidence. As a result, his defense mechanisms begin to destabilize, revealing the psychological tension between his awareness of the threat, his fear of punishment, and his desire to protect himself emotionally.
And so I want you to really use this time here to be honest with me about what happened that night, because I think that we know what happened, and I think that your mom knows what happened, because she also wrote down a list of times that you went in and out of the house that night, to include the time that the call came in. And I think you probably know that you wouldn't be in here unless we had a good reason to put you in.
I don't see... What?
It's not about see, Randy John. It's truth.
Yeah, truth. It's impossible for my DNA to be on her underwear.
That's what we like to think too, brother, but that stuff doesn't lie, that stuff doesn't get made up. And sometimes the truth can be hard. You seem like a really good guy, man. You seem like you got a good head on your shoulders, you make connections with people that need help, you go out there and you help other people. And there's people out there sometimes that make mistakes, man.
Come over here and
it doesn't make you a bad person for making a mistake.
From the very first moments of this phase of the session, the psychological atmosphere leaned toward a tense quietness. The suspect sat in a silent, defensive posture, convinced that his early denial was enough to shut the door on the investigator's questions. This behavior is common among young offenders. They construct a wall of calm innocence, believing that a composed tone can conceal their internal confusion. The investigator then began manipulating the environment itself. Shifting his seat to face the child directly was not a random detail. In forensic psychology, altering the angle of confrontation is a nonverbal signal used to elevate emotional pressure without raising the investigator's voice. This maneuver shortens the psychological distance between the two and forces the suspect to feel that the truth is now closer than ever. The second investigator then transitions into what is known as moral bridge building, where he begins expressing a surface-level understanding while, in reality, preparing the arena of confession. He gives the child the impression that the session is not adversarial but collaborative, as if saying, "I already know everything, but I want to understand your version more deeply." This technique is commonly used with suspects who are not yet psychologically mature, as they often search for a moral exit that justifies their presence in the circle of suspicion.
Well, we just need to understand, like, who is Randy John, man? Because I don't,
Holy cow.
and we don't think that that was the intention. But we need to understand what happened, man.
Randy, I want to be real clear with you. We know what happened. What I want to hear from your own words, everything that went on that night.
God. Holy cow.
I want to know why this happened.
Randy, help us understand, man.
Randy, look at me for a second. You did this exact same thing when I asked you about you walking down the road or jogging down the road at 11 o'clock. And you did the whole, I don't remember, and I was like, bullshit. And you finally admitted to it. And I think this is the exact same thing. I know what happened. And it's only going to help you for you to be honest with me about what happened. Because like I said, we know what happened because we have your DNA at the crime scene.
Like you said, it's not like we're talking about a sweater that it was found on. It's in this elderly woman's underwear. What are you thinking, man? We're putting everything out here, and you're kind of just looking at all this, man. I know it might be a shock, but what are you thinking?
I'm overly confused.
What are you confused about?
I wasn't even near her house. I was across the street.
A whole hour, you were gone.
Yeah.
As the psychological pressure rises, the child attempts to detach himself from reality with a simple claim, "I wasn't there." This reflects one of the oldest denial strategies, spatiotemporal denial, in which the suspect tries to sever any link between himself and the crime scene by denying being in the area entirely. But when the investigator informs him that he disappeared for a full hour, this spatiotemporal justification collapses completely. A person may deny an action, but cannot deny the empty block of time left behind. This method of exposing deception without direct confrontation is known in interrogation science as progressive temporal pressure, a technique that destabilizes the suspect by striking at what he believes is his safest point, his timeline narrative.
Mom, I don't know if you want to have a couple minutes to talk with your son. Randy, I want you to think real long and hard about everything that happened. And I want to do this, listen, more than I want to have the truth from you about what happened, because I know that you know what happened, I want to do this for her. If she is as an amazing of a person as you say she is, and I believe you because I've talked with her, getting all of this out in the open for her is what matters.
She deserves the truth to be told, and you know it. Personally, I can't believe that this is a horrible thing, Randy John. That's a horrible thing.
Jesse resists the investigators, fleeing into denial, hiding behind short phrases and pretending to be confused and unaware. But there is one person in his life before whom he cannot wear the same masks, his grandmother. So the investigators leave the room, and the child is left alone with her.
I don't even have the ability to do that.
Well, It's hard for me to believe too. It's really hard for me to believe too that you would do a thing like this.
I didn't.
But how many times have you been caught in lies?
I know.
And this is the whole reason why you're on restriction. It's because you're not telling the truth about things. If this woman deserves to have the truth, she deserves it, and you know that.
What?
Don't say why's, Ready John, because why doesn't exist here.
I wasn't at her house.
Ready John,
It's across the street.
look at her. Look at her. Look at her face. That's
I don't even think like that.
I've never seen you hurt anybody, but
I don't want to hurt
what the
anyone.
hell are you doing outside at that time of night? It doesn't make any sense. Do you understand? Ready, John, it doesn't make any sense. There's a million different things you can do. Being outside where you don't belong, and you know you don't belong out there.
I'm sorry, but I'm an outdoorsy person.
You're not an outdoorsy person. You're a sit in front of the TV kind of guy.
When I don't have TV, I'm outside.
Well, I don't know. I hope and pray you did not do this to this
I
woman.
didn't.
I hope and pray. I hope and pray you did not do this. Because this is horrific.
I didn't.
This is a human being. And she deserves justice. She does. If this would have happened to your sister, what would you do?
Murder whoever did.
If you know anything about this, Ready John, for her at least, if you care about her, tell the truth. Tell the truth.
You know,
We've been down that road before where you've been lying about something and you swear up and Randy John, you've lied about stuff before.
When the investigator left the room, he wasn't giving a break or a timeout. He was preparing for an entirely new phase of psychological pressure. And what happened after he stepped out wasn't just a family conversation, it was one of the key moments that changed the entire course of the interrogation. Once the boy was alone with his grandmother, a new gap opened, one that had never appeared in the presence of the police. A moral gap. The grandmother represents no law, no threat. She represents a kind of shame he cannot escape. Without realizing it, the grandmother shifted the interrogation to a level that could never occur in front of an officer. And when his convictions began to waver, the investigator returned to the room.
And I just got done talking to your mom, and she said that, I mean, you're 14, right? I think every 14-year-old's got had some thoughts about what a woman's like and things like that. And I heard that you've been kind of exploring some nudity and pornography. Is that what's going on, man? The thing is, Grandma's got no reason to lie to me, and you have no reason to lie to me about that either. That's totally normal and totally fine. So is that something you've been, I heard you taking Grandpa's phone and taking a look at that. Yeah, like
no, I don't do it on Grandpa's phone. I haven't been able to do it since I had my computer because she takes everything away.
Yeah. Well, is it true that you were looking at some of that stuff? Like I said, it's totally normal, man. Okay. And like I said, and I think like Detective Hardigan said, it's totally normal to want to find out about these things, especially for someone it seems like you really truly cared about this woman.
Yeah.
And maybe you just wanted to figure out what was what, man.
When the investigator returned to the room, the goal wasn't simply to resume the interrogation, it was the most delicate psychological shift in the entire session. Jesse was no longer the same resilient child who refused to confess in the face of evidence. And the investigator didn't begin with a direct confrontation. Instead, he chose a new psychological bridge, the natural sexual curiosity of adolescence. He used it to create a relatively safe environment where Jesse could feel that talking about such matters doesn't incriminate him, but rather presents him as normal, not guilty or malicious.
What it like? Maybe you went into there, you didn't expect for her to be awake. And so you freaked out. And you panicked. Because that's what it looks like. Is that this was a, oh shit. and then maybe you just slapped her around, not expecting her to. Maybe you just wanted to knock her out. You didn't think you would hurt her this bad. And then you got out of there.
Because what we're trying to figure out, Randy John, is like Tech Party said, like we're pretty certain of what happened. What we're trying to figure out is Randy John the kind of guy that breaks into people's houses with axes and chops them up into pieces and leaves them and murders them, or did Randy John just make a mistake? Did he go into a house and expect this 91-year-old woman to be sleeping and maybe figure out something about life, and then things just went awry? Because thing is, people panic, man. And people do things that they don't mean and they don't want to do when they panic.
Honestly, Randy John, I feel like you probably wish that this had never happened. Like, I honestly still believe that you never really intended to hurt. Because you care about her.
Yeah, I don't intend to hurt anyone.
So, how old were you when you started watching the porn videos?
My friend showed them to me when I was 10.
10. So you've been watching them since you were 10?
Off and on, yeah.
Okay. How often do you think you were watching them before you got put on restriction?
Once or twice a week.
Okay.
The video was withheld from public release by law enforcement due to containing highly sensitive scenes. During the interrogation, the boy admitted to being exposed to inappropriate material from an early age. This early exposure, without any guidance or proper understanding, contributed to a distorted perception of acceptable and appropriate behavior, resulting in complex emotional responses, increased impulsivity, and poor judgment of consequences. All of this formed the psychological backdrop for the events that occurred that night. At the conclusion of the case, Jesse Stone was sentenced to 25 years in prison, followed by 30 years of supervision after his release.